So tonight is LaRouche PAC strategic overview. It's January 8th. As many of you know, LaRouche PAC has put out a 5-part series, The Police Dossier, How the British Assassinate American Presidents. And I think all of you are well aware of the context of that. We have a leading presidential candidate in President Trump. We have ongoing revelations of the kind of false flag and entrapment efforts by the FBI and other agencies inside the government and in the Capitol to try to, undermine his presidency and undermine this broader political movement. And this political movement is now stretches to every part of the world, is looking for a consolidated sense of the existence of nations, not of empires. And tonight we have a special guest, Bob Ingram, who will give some opening remarks and then take some questions and dialogue on this pamphlet, but more so on the implications and context for this LaRouche PAC deployment, which I will post in the chat here once Bob begins his presentation. So without further ado, let me give you Bob Ingram, and let's have a good discussion tonight.
Hello, everyone. We can get into a lot of things in the discussion period, but the subject matter of this briefing is the dossier which we recently posted on the LaRouche PAC website. I believe this is going to be professionally produced as a pamphlet, which will be downloadable and printable and that sort of thing. I think it is, Mike referenced the current threat to the life of Donald Trump. So I think it is extremely important that we get the widest possible circulation of this material. Not just in terms of the threat to Trump, although that is paramount, but also in terms of giving people a deeper sense, a deeper understanding of what this battle that we're engaged in is really all about. Why it is that the British Empire hates Donald Trump so intensely and is determined that he not serve a second term. Now, I'll just say, this is just a homemade thing. This is not what we're going to produce as a pamphlet, but this is what we're talking about here: a police dossier. It is the British who murder our presidents, and as I said, I would urge, if you have not read it, if there's anyone on this call who has not read this material, I strongly urge you to do so. It is available on the LaRouche PAC website, very easy to access, and I would urge you to do it as quickly as possible. Now, there are 5 parts to it. An introductory part, then a section on Donald Trump and the current and ongoing operations against Donald Trump, a chapter, a part on the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, a part on the assassination of William McKinley, and a part on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Now, that said, tonight, given the time constraints of a presentation like this, I am not going to really go into these reports very much in this meeting. There are some things I'm going to read to you, But they deal with the larger question of why these three presidents were killed and why the threat to Donald Trump exists right now. In terms of the details of the assassinations, the killing of Lincoln, McKinley, and Kennedy, all of the what you could call forensic evidence in regard to those assassinations. I'm not going to go into it all tonight, or very, very little, because there's just no time to do it. And I really want to focus people on a different aspect of this, because as I said, the title of the report is "It is the British who murder our presidents." And what I want to pose tonight is why, as opposed to presenting the evidence and all of that. That's in the reports. But what I want to pose is the question, why? Why have the British, why has the British Empire targeted and killed American presidents? And in Barbara Boyd's section of the report on Donald Trump, she references something which Lyndon LaRouche once said, where LaRouche said that the oligarchy does not choose its targets because of what they have done, but they choose their targets for what they could or would do in the future. And if you look at Lincoln, if you look at all four of these cases, Lincoln, McKinley, and John F. Kennedy were all killed, not really because of what they had done. That was bad enough. Excuse me. They were killed because the British were absolutely determined to prevent them from serving a second term. They were killed because of what the British Empire feared they would do during a second term, what they would do in the future. And this is the case with Donald Trump right now. And this has been made very, very clear in the House of Lords report, which I'll go into a little later, and some other things, that it is the view of the British oligarchy that under no circumstances should Donald Trump be allowed to serve a second term as president of the United States. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to jump right in here. And this may seem a little strange to you and maybe even a little tedious, but in the reports, I include, in the dossier, I include sections from several speeches that were given by a number of individuals. And I know of no better way to really get at this question, why these presidents were killed, than to read to you from these speeches. So this will take a little bit of time, and it might be a little hard to follow, but I really think it's the best thing to do. So the first thing I'm going to read to you is, these are all excerpts, not the entire speeches. The first thing I'm going to read to you is from the speech that President Donald Trump gave on January 21st, 2020, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And what Trump said in that speech is the following: "This is not time for pessimism. This is time for optimism. Fear and doubt is not a good thought process, because this is a time for tremendous hope and joy and optimism and action. To embrace the possibilities of tomorrow, We must reject the perennial prophets of doom and their predictions of apocalypse. They are the heirs of yesterday's foolish fortune tellers. They predicted an overpopulation crisis in the 1960s, mass starvation in the 1970s, and an end of oil in the 1990s. These alarmists always demand the same thing: absolute power to dominate, transform, and control every aspect of our lives. Anyone who doubts what is possible in the future, for anyone who doubts what is possible in the future, we need only look at the towering achievements of the past. Only a few hundred miles from here are some of the greatest cities of Europe, teeming centers of commerce and culture. Each of them is full of reminders of what human drive and human imagination can achieve. Centuries ago, at the time of the Renaissance, skilled craftsmen and laborers looked upwards and built the structures that still touch the human heart. To this day, some of the greatest structures in the world have been built hundreds of years ago. In Italy, the citizens once started construction on what would be a 140-year project, the Duomo of Florence, an incredible, incredible place. While the technology did not yet exist to complete their design, city fathers forged ahead anyway, certain that they would figure it out someday. These citizens of Florence did not accept limits to their high aspirations, and so the Great Dome was finally built. The cathedrals of Europe teach us to pursue big dreams, daring adventures, and unbridled ambitions. They urge us to consider not only what we build today, but what will endure long after we are gone. They testify to the power of ordinary people to realize extraordinary achievements when united by a grand and noble purpose. And then after going on a little bit, Trump concludes with the following: together we must go forward with confidence, determination, and vision. We must not be timid or meek or fearful, but instead we must boldly seize the day and embrace the moment. Together, we will make our nation stronger, our country safer, our culture richer, our people freer, and the world more beautiful than ever before. Above all else, we will forever be loyal to our workers, our citizens, our families, the men and women who are the backbone of our economies, the heart of our communities, and the soul of our countries. Let us bring light to their lives one by one and empower them to light up the world. So that's what Trump said now 3 years ago in 2020 at the Davos conference. 4 years ago, 4 years ago at the Davos conference. Now, the second excerpt I'm going to read to you is from the speech given by William McKinley on September 5th, 1901, at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. And I will say that McKinley was assassinated 24 hours after giving this speech. So this is an excerpt from his speech to that exposition. He says, "The Pan American Exposition has done its work thoroughly, presenting in its exhibits evidences of the highest skill and illustrating the progress of the human family. This portion of the earth has no cause for humiliation for the part it has performed in the march of civilization. The wisdom and energy of all nations are none too great for the world's work. The success of art, science, industry, and invention is an international asset and a common glory. Modern inventions have brought into close relation widely separated peoples and made them better acquainted. Geographic and political divisions will continue to exist, but distances have been effaced. At the beginning of the 19th century, there was not a single mile of steam railroad anywhere on the globe. Now there are enough miles to make its circuit many times. Then there was not a line of electric telegraph. Now we have a vast mileage traversing all lands and seas. God and man have linked the nations together. No nation can longer be indifferent to any other. Who can tell the new thoughts that have been awakened, the ambitions fired, and the high achievements that will be wrought through this exposition? Gentlemen, let us ever remember that our interest is in concord, not conflict, and that our real eminence rests in the victories of peace, not those of war. We hope that all who are represented here may be moved to higher and nobler effort for their own and the world's good, and that out of this city may come not only greater commerce and trade, but more essential than these, relations of mutual respect, confidence, and friendship, which will deepen and endure. Our earnest prayer is that God will graciously vouchsafe prosperity, happiness, and peace to all our neighbors, and like blessings to all the peoples and powers of earth. The good work will go on. It cannot be stopped. These buildings will disappear. This creation of art and beauty and industry will perish from sight, but their influence will remain to make it live beyond its too short living with praises and thanksgiving. So that was William McKinley and his vision of peace and global cooperation in 1901. Now, the third thing I'm going to read to you is actually not from a president, and it's not from a speech. It's a short excerpt written by Henry Carey from his book, The Harmony of Interests, which was published in 1851. Carey, for any of you who don't know him, was the leading American economist of the 19th century, a close advisor to Abraham Lincoln, and the champion of Lincoln's greenback sovereign currency. And in The Harmony of Interest, he wrote, "Two systems are before the world. One system looks to pauperism, ignorance, depopulation, and barbarism. The other system to increasing wealth, comfort, intelligence, and civilization. One looks towards universal war. The other looks toward universal peace. The first is the English system. The other we may be proud to call the American system, for it is the only one ever devised, the tendency of which was that of elevating while equalizing the condition of man throughout the world, elevating while equalizing the condition of man. Such is the true mission of the people of these United States, to raise the value of labor. To raise the value of labor throughout the world, we need only to raise the value of our own labor. To improve the political condition of man throughout the world, it is that we ourselves should remain at peace, avoid taxation for the maintenance of fleets and armies, and become rich and prosperous, to diffuse intelligence, and to promote the cause of morality throughout the world. We are required only to pursue the course that shall diffuse education throughout our own land, and shall enable every man more readily to acquire property, and with it respect for the rights of property, to substitute true Christianity for the detestable system known as the Malthusian. It is needed that we prove to the world that it is population that makes food, come from the rich soils, and food tends to increase more rapidly than population, thus vindicating the policy of God to man. So that is Henry Carey on the difference between the British system and the American system. One detestable, and the other we are proud to call the American system. And then finally, the final excerpt is from the speech given by John F. Kennedy at American University on June 10th, 1963, only 5 months before his assassination. And, you know, the more I have thought about the Kennedy assassination and what he was doing in 1962 and then into 1963, I think this speech may have been the breaking point for the British oligarchy, that they simply could not tolerate this kind of vision for another 5 years in the White House. So this is Kennedy's speech from June of 1963. It's sometimes referred to as his peace speech. And he says the following: "What kind of peace do I mean? What kind of peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana enforced on the world by American weapons of war. Not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace for all time. Our problems are man-made. Therefore, they can be solved by man. And man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable, and we believe that we can do it again. When a man's ways please the Lord, the scripture tells us, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. And is not peace, in the last analysis, basically a matter of human rights? The right to live out our lives without fear of devastation, the right to breathe air as nature provided it, the right of future generations to a healthy existence. We shall also do our part to build a world of peace, where the weak are safe and the strong are just. We are not helpless before the task or hopeless of its success. Confident and unafraid, we labor on, not toward a strategy of annihilation, but toward a strategy of peace. So that was Kennedy in 1963. And I mean, I don't want to try to interpret or really comment on what you just heard, what I just read. But you can see, in these, in what I read to you, a certain vision. I mean, first of all of these have in common, have a common moral thread, a common philosophical thread of creating a better future, of creating cooperation among nations, of creating peace in the world, of uplifting the population, of building up science and technology and a productive economy. I mean, all of these speeches abound with an optimism of what we can create, what we can build, what the future can be. And all three of these presidents were murdered before they could carry out a second term, serve a second term. And Donald Trump is being similarly targeted today. Now, I will just say a couple of things for those who have not read the dossier, or for those who, are not familiar with some of these things from American history. I mean, these assassinations have had profound implications and effects, which we are still living in today. I mean, for instance, the assassination of William McKinley in 1901 was one of the most violent turning points in American history, a turning point in the wrong direction. And we have been living with the consequences of that ever since. Now, there have been, many good things that have happened since 1901, but many of the things that occurred as a result of the McKinley assassination permanently changed certain things in this country and globally, the effects of which are very much still with us today. Teddy Roosevelt came in. Teddy Roosevelt was a raving Anglophile. He immediately terminated our friendship and our partnership with Russia, with Germany, with Japan, these had been our traditional friends since the time of the Lincoln administration. He terminated all of that. He brought the United States into a global partnership with the British Empire. He ended many of Roosevelt's policies. He ended Roosevelt's policy of McKinley's policies. He ended McKinley's policy of friendship towards Latin America, what McKinley called reciprocity. And he brought in this colonial policy of the big stick policy, invading countries, attacking countries. In 1907, he created the National Monetary Commission, and it was the National Monetary Commission which led directly into the creation of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, was, passed into law. It was enacted under Woodrow Wilson, but all of the steps to create it occurred under Teddy Roosevelt. He also created the FBI, what was called the Bureau of Investigation at that point, which it couldn't even get passed through Congress because the congressman objected, saying this was a national police force, basically a secret police, like in Tsarist Russia or somewhere. And so he created it by executive order. And, as a result, by 1914, we were in a global alliance with the British Empire. Another supporter of the British Empire, who was also a supporter of the Ku Klux Klan, Woodrow Wilson, was in the White House. And, we entered World War I on the side of the British Empire, who had been our enemy, our primary strategic enemy from 1775 all the way up to the McKinley assassination. And, many of these consequences are with us today, including obviously the Federal Reserve and many other things. Kennedy, people know this is not something, hidden. Kennedy was, it's now so well documented, it can't be argued with, that Kennedy had already given the order to withdraw some of our military forces from Vietnam. He had made it very clear he intended to withdraw all of our military forces from Vietnam in very short order. That those orders were countermanded and reversed within days of his assassination. Many other things were done. I'm not going to go into all of them. If you look at what I read to you from Kennedy's speech at American University on peace and on the future, a key aspect of the Kennedy presidency was the space program. And you can't set this off to one side. There is a vision of creating a future, a more productive future, right? For everyone, for all of our citizens to participate in, for people all over the world to participate in, by the late 1960s, even while Lyndon Johnson was still president, the space program was already being cut back. And by the time Nixon came in, the decision had been made to, abandon, to stop permanently all further manned U.S. space flight beyond Earth orbit. We have not been back to the moon now in 50 years. By 1965, now, if Kennedy had been elected president again in 1964, he would have just begun his second term in 1965. But Kennedy was dead in 1965. And what else happened that year? Well, that was the year that the British launched their Opium War against the United States. That was the year that they began flooding the United States with drugs, flooding it with drugs. And, the story of this, we've covered in LaRouche Pack over many years, and I cover it in a book that I recently wrote called Unconditional Surrender, Winning the War Against Drugs in the 21st Century. This was a a modern day opium war, a modern day drug war, you know. And as you moved into the 1960s, 66, 67, 68, all of those years, Kennedy would have been president if he had served a second term. But instead, as you moved into those years, you got the carnage of the Vietnam War, and you got the creation of mass drug usage all across the United States. And I think, as all of you recognize, hopefully, we are certainly living with the consequences of that drug usage, drug culture today. As the drugs continue to pour in, and through fentanyl and others, killing us now. But even the drugs that don't kill us poison the minds, sap the morality of our younger people. And this is what was done with the murder of John F. Kennedy. Lincoln, I'm not going to go into really right now. I will say one thing about his killing. I make a point in the dossier about the Civil War, and the point that I make is that there is no such thing as the Civil War. It's a label that has been placed, and there's no way to get rid of it. But it's a label that has been placed on what occurred in the United States between 1861 and 1865. But it was not a civil war. It was a proxy war, a proxy war of the British Empire attacking and attempting to destroy the United States. Just as much as what we see today in the Ukraine, where the British, the Biden administration, NATO, are using the Ukraine to try to attack, weaken, and destroy Russia. Well, the British used the Confederacy to attack, weaken, and attempt to destroy the United States. And if you look at what's going on in the Ukraine today, we're giving them money, we're giving them weapons, we're giving them supplies, we're giving them food. And that's exactly what the British did with the Confederacy. All the Confederates' weapons, all their artillery, all their ammunition was shipped over from England. Their food was shipped over from England. Their warships were built in England. This was a proxy war against the United States to destroy it. And at the close of the war, having failed to destroy the Union, and with the Union emerging, as a result of the war buildup, as the greatest industrial and scientific power in the world, really in human history, what the British Empire was looking at was 4 more years of Abraham Lincoln in the White House. And they simply could not allow that to occur. And, I will read you this short excerpt from Lincoln's second inaugural address. He was dead within a month or 6 weeks of giving this inaugural address. I don't know the exact date of his assassination, but this is a portion which a lot of people are familiar with, but it bears reading. He says, this is Abraham Lincoln, March of 1865. Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet if God wills that it continue until all the wealth piled up by the bondsmen's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword. As was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for them who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. Again, it's a message of peace. It's a message of healing, in the wake of the horrors of the Civil War, but it's an optimistic message of healing, of a better future that can now be created. And the British could not allow this. Another Lincoln presidency, not with a man like Abraham Lincoln. So, I mean, this brings us back to Trump and, I would urge people, it's far too detailed. It's far too dense material to go into the material that Barbara Boyd presents in part 2 of our dossier. Because obviously, the British Empire attack on Trump has a long history. It's very involved. But the reality is that it's overwhelming. The evidence that the attack on Trump, going back at least until 2015, the famous story of when he came down the escalator in 2015 at Trump Tower, going back at least to that date, if not earlier, the entire targeting of Trump, all of the efforts to destroy Trump, Russiagate, the impeachment, the Mueller Commission, all of this stuff, everything from the beginning was directed by British intelligence. And what is somewhat shocking to me, to tell you the truth, is how few Trump loyalists who have their own little YouTube channels and podcasts and what have you, who know that this is true, shy away from saying it publicly. I mean, you see it here and there. People do mention it. It's hard not to with, the role of Christopher Steele and others. But and one of the things Barbara mentions in her report is an article that appeared in the London Guardian in 2017. So this is during Trump's term. Article appeared in the London Guardian entitled British Spies Were First to Spot Trump Team's Links with Russia. And in the article, they say that GCHQ is British intelligence. That's their headquarters, HQ. GCHQ first became aware in late 2015 of suspicious interactions between figures connected to Trump and known or suspected Russian agents. This intelligence was passed to the United States as part of a routine exchange of information. I don't know if you call it routine, because John Brennan, later the head of the CIA, later reported that one morning, there was a knocking on his door, and he went and answered his front door, and there were a whole bunch of people from British intelligence carrying briefcases and folders, full of all of this alleged evidence proving that Trump was, linked to Putin and being manipulated by Russia. And they had come to Brennan's home to deliver this material to him, which I don't think is exactly routine. But this has been the case from the beginning. And then in 2018, you had the British House of Lords. The British House of Lords has one of their committees is called the Select Committee on International Policy. And in June of 2018, this select committee made up of British lords visited Washington, D.C., and met with a whole bunch of people there. And coming out of that, they issued a report about 5 months later called UK Foreign Policy in a Shifting World. And that was the report where they say, quote, the US administration, that is the Trump administration, has taken a number of high-profile, unilateral foreign policy decisions that are contrary to the interests of the United Kingdom. Trump has taken a number of high-profile, unilateral foreign policy decisions contrary to the interests of the United Kingdom, right? And the former head of MI6, British intelligence, Sir Richard Dearloffe, was quoted as saying, should President Trump win a second term or a similar administration succeed him, the damage done to British-American relations will be longer lasting, and the government, that is the British government, will need to place less reliance on reaching a common US-UK approach to the main issues of the day than has often been the case in the past. So what are they saying? What's the House of Lords saying? What's Richard Dearloffe of British MI6 saying? They're saying that Donald Trump is a strategic threat to British global interests, or you want to put it more honestly, British imperial global interests. So now we have people openly talking about assassination or hinting about it. Again, Barbara goes into this in her part of her report. She goes into the role of this guy, Robert Kagan and others, who wrote a piece in the Washington Post on November 30th, just about 6 weeks ago, wrote a piece in the Washington Post where he called for the assassination of Trump. Now, he didn't do that. He didn't say someone should kill Trump. But basically, he went as far as you could go without actually saying the words. And if you look around now at what people are saying, Trump is being compared to Hitler. People are saying, well, if you could go back in time to 1933 and kill Hitler before he built the concentration camps and started World War II, wouldn't you go back in time and kill Hitler before he could become a dictator, before he could do all these terrible things? I mean, Michelle Obama, all these people, one after the other, are saying that if Trump is going to get back in, he's going to establish a dictatorship, that it's going to be the end of democracy, that there will be no more free elections in this country. What is all this? We're way beyond name calling. This is creating a violent pre-assassination atmosphere in the country. And that's the threat to Donald Trump right now. Now, I think I'll just end right there, so we have some time. I mean, if people have a problem, about this question of the British Empire, I mean, you can bring it up. I will, urge you to read the dossier, because the part one of the dossier um, deals exclusively, almost, with this question of what is the modern day British Empire, um, and why the British Empire is not a friend, an ally of the United States. It is the creature which has murdered our presidents and which is out to stop Trump now. So let's open it up, Mike.